Alright, so this is a basic introduction to the features module. So what is features? Well, when we think of like a feature, we might think of like a CD player in our car is a feature of the car. On our website, that might be like a photo gallery, with a bunch of cats in it, or the blog. But so specifically, what features is a module that lets you encapsulate the different aspects of your site and apply some version control to them. So this is a slide of the basic Drupal architecture. Sorry, we just decided to go ahead and get started. You didn't miss anything. So this is basically just to show you, you have your configuration, and that's saved in the database. So what features does is bring that configuration out of the database into code. Features is a Drupal module. And what the features module also has is a user interface for creating and updating features that you create through the features module. So why use the features module? Well, you can separate the site configuration from the site content. It encapsulates different functionality of your site. Like I said, you might, depending on the needs of your site, will dictate what goes into your feature. A lot of features that I do will have like a content type, a view, and then maybe related theming functionality that might actually go in the code in a feature. Another important aspect of the feature that it allows version control. So usually if you have a development environment, you have a staging environment, you have a production environment, sort of like a basic setup. So you have your client making configuration changes in production. So it's a way to keep track of them and not sort of try to reduce the problems of messing up configuration in production. It makes for easier deployment. So, in theory, I guess depending on how large your site is, you might, if you make a development change, you could write down what you changed in the UI. Well, I created a new view, or I updated this view, or I added a field to a content type. And you might be able to just list those out and make the changes in the different environments. But what features allows you to do is take those changes and just with basically a few clicks of the mouse, you put those in code, and then you don't have to worry about remembering them when you deploy. You just deploy the feature. So it should save development time in that respect. So exportable types. By default, content types, fields, menus, taxonomies, just a bunch of different things will sort of automatically work with features and be exportable is the term that's used. The StrongArm module will allow you to export system variables into features. And there's various other modules like the ones listed there, boxes, node panels, not node panels, panels, nodes, node queues. Any module can support exporting as a feature. It just depends on if the maintainer has configured that functionality. So this is pretty much what I was saying before, why you would use features. Just some of the use cases. You bundle sort of the functionality conceptually. Like I said, it may be different for different sites, or how you conceive things fitting together. I don't think a necessarily right or wrong answer, what should go in a feature. I think that just the fact that it does go in the feature is the important thing. So deploy configuration data using a feature. so you can transfer permissions from dev to production. So that's definitely, you know, probably a common thing where there's, you have your roles set up, and maybe you need a new role, and so you got to go through to that awesome Drupal permissions page with all the checkboxes, and so that's one easy way to capture that configuration. Demo time. So it's not an actual demo. It's basically just more slides. I mean, if anybody has questions, you know, feel free to chime in if you want to. Feel free to, you know, throw spitballs if you're bored too. Okay, that's, I guess, slightly legible. I think the user interface has actually been updated since then, but this is the basic UI for features. So you give your feature a name and a description. So what's the package? The package is, it's a way of grouping features together, essentially. So you might, you know, if, let's say your site is for a specific company, you might call the package that company name. And then the version, so that's definitely a key feature of the features.
Is the package the thing that would show up on the modules page as far as the grouping of your
That's
features?
right. Yes. So I don't know if you heard the question, like if you just go to the modules UI page, that your feature will be listed under what you put as the package. URL of update XML. Well, so that's, I wonder if that's on the next slide where it talks about that. So there's a sort of features server, but it's, I will say I haven't really used it. So, but it's a way of, if you notice in your modules listing how they have, you might get an update notice. So that's one way of letting sites that are using your feature know that there might be an update to it. So what do we have here? In this example, we're adding cat fields to a feature. Yes, so it's essentially adding a content type. So we're adding the body, the age field, and an image for some cats, because we are obsessed with cats. So what happens when you create a feature? Well, basically, you're just downloading a tar package. It's just, you know, a bunch of files zipped together. So, and then it just installs like any other normal module would. The features module itself would probably go in your site's all modules folder. The feature that you create would probably go in your custom folder if that's how you set up your site.
Is features required to be on the production
Yes.
site?
Okay. Yes.
So what's the difference between a feature and a module?
Well, there isn't. Like a feature is a module. A feature is a special module. You can do the same things like in a feature. Like if you have custom code in your module code, you can still have that in your feature module. It's the feature, you can just think of it as a special module that lets you interact with the feature's UI, essentially. You can also...
this is basically giving you a GUI
right.
to create your own custom module to deploy all of these.
Yes, and it encapsulates, you know, like different functionality that you might not have like in your module, like the content types or views or fields. That you might just create through the Drupal user interface, and if you want to, you know, enable those things on another environment, all you have to do is put them in the feature, and then move the feature along, and then enable the feature, and then it'll create the view, and it'll create the fields or the content types automatically.
So did I understand that correctly? That will be in the modules list.
Yes,
but you do need features installed though for it to enable?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
So that's...
Yeah.
Or why it is different than just a module in terms of.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and it will display on the Drupal's module listing page. So it is a module. It is a Drupal module. It's a special.
As a dependency feature.
Right. Yes, it has a dependency on features.
But you can't customize modules in the same way?
You could build your own modules to do pretty much everything, most of the stuff, but you wouldn't have this nice graphical front end if you like that.
Yeah, I guess what is sort of so what's your use case of what you're asking?
I'm just trying to understand
Oh.
the terminology.
Yeah, it can be a little confusing. You can do anything in a feature module that you can do in a regular module, but your regular module won't be usable by the features GUI unless it has the special features code in.
I'm trying to understand the big picture of
Sure.
this thing here. You know, I've got a dev, a stage, and a production environment. I've got developers which are developing on their own laptops and somehow tying back in to dev with a Git repository or something along that line. And if they're building content like entity forms or things like that on their individual laptops, then this features would be used to transfer things in a standardized way into dev, or from dev to stage, or stage to production.
Yes,
Is that correct?
Yes, that's a great use case for that. If one developer, let's say, is creating the article content type, creating article views, and others creating an event content type, an event view, so they would export those things into a feature, and then when the other developer got it, or if it went into the other environment, all they would do was enable that feature, and they would have the view and the content type. They wouldn't have to go in and manually create those things, replicate those things in the other environments.
Now, would they be building, like each one of them would build their own little feature, and then once it gets to dev, then they would build another feature, which is the composite of all these other components, or?
Well,
or
no, not
how is
necessarily.
it typically used in a production environment?
You would probably have a feature for each one of those things. Like I said, it depends on your site and your needs and how you conceptually think of these things. Like I typically would create, if I have like an article, I would have all the functionality, like a view, a content type, and whatever else was associated with that article, I would have that in a single feature. And then if there were other features, those wouldn't get mashed up into one giant feature. They would stay separately, and that way you can track the changes to each one of those things. Like if the article got a new field, got an editor field or something like that, then you could add that to the feature, and then when you deploy to the different environments, basically, well, we haven't gotten to that part yet, but you would just what's called revert the feature, and then what that means is what's in the database would be overridden by what's in the code. Typically, well, it'll come along. I think it's in the next couple of slides, but if somebody makes a change to what's stored in your feature, it'll show as overridden in the GUI of features.
I didn't mean to get ahead of you.
Oh no, that's okay. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions and talk about it.
If I could ask,
Sure.
what I would normally have done, if I understand what you're talking about correctly, is I would use backup and migrate, and then select the different elements that I want to back up, and then import it into the staging or the production side. Say user permissions or something, I would just save that portion of the database and then bring that and overwrite it in the production, although I don't think it does version control that way.
Right.
But I would have made a backup of the production site before I did that in case I had a fallback.
I mean, if I would say if that works, I guess the sort of benefit to this is it's in code, and then the code itself has the version control in addition to having versions on your feature. I mean, just in case. I guess you never really know what the user's changing in the database, or through the UI that will get into the database.
Right.
What I've used Backup and Migrate for is the actual content. My understanding is that features is more the structure and the configuration?
Yes.
Or does that do the content as well?
No, features is not for content.
So I can't bring my content over with it. So I would still be using Backup and Migrate for that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I hadn't, even thought of using Backup and Migrate for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it applies in all the things that features does, but I know that I was able to back up like the number of times a page was viewed, or certain characteristics of pages, not just the content.
Right. Well, yeah, what I think you said is essentially correct. I mean, it's not to store like data, it's to encapsulate the configuration, not the content.
Okay.
So in a case like we were talking about before with the dev stage and production, are you putting the content into dev, testing everything there, and then in parallel putting that into stage, and then copying the database from stage production? Or how do you what is best practices and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the testing changes that would affect content, I guess. So the idea here is sort of it's keeping content sort of separate from the configuration of your site. But I think what you're saying is that you need to be able to test that configuration on content. Is that sort of? I would say you would have, if you have you would always, I think, try to bring your database back from production and into the stage and dev environments. But I think if you're able to replicate the content that's in the production environment and test those changes as they're moving from dev to production, I don't know that you need to have the exact content, because the content's kind of viewed differently, right? It's something that if they have workflow, you track it with that, but it's kind of different from how your website works. It's it's sort of the what it works on. I don't think I'm answering your question very well.
So basically what you're saying is content is always put in production, updating production directly, and everything else goes from dev to stage to production.
Yes. I would say you probably replicate dummy content that would be like it's in production to test your changes in dev. So when your changes that you're making and your features get to production, in theory, you shouldn't have any issues.
So this may or may not relate. This is essentially taking all your configuration settings for whatever, whether it's an article and so you don't have to, after you migrate from dev to staging, you don't have to go in and reconfigure everything that you've done in the development environment. That's all there for you instead of, because you move the content with the database, everything, and on the site. This allows you just to move essentially the configuration, so you're not making those changes. It's already there for you.
You articulated what I was trying to say much better than I did. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So this is what an exported feature actually looks like. That's the module info file, and you see that there is a dependency on features. And then depending on what is contained in your features, it might have dependencies on the other modules. So I think we added a cat field, or cat image field, so it has dependency for image and a few other ones. So this, I guess, is really sort of difference that you won't see in a standard module info file. It's basically telling the code part of the features module what is contained in the feature. So then there is the features include file, and that's just the Drupal hook. That's for the content type. So that'll just, whenever you push that forward, that is what enables the content type to be created on the next environment. So it's all in the code mostly. So this slide is talking about different exportables. So we have pure exportables, where it means everything is in code and nothing's in the database. Faux, where there's some code and there's some configuration in the database. So for pure exportables, views and CTools, etc., you can actually use existing module hooks, and you don't actually need features for those. But for the faux exportables, it requires features in order to encapsulate the configuration into code. Updating a feature. So if a client makes a manual change to the database configuration, so if they change like a setting in the production environment, or I think in this specific case it looks like something in our cat feature was changed. So maybe they changed like a field description. They didn't like the wording on it, so they decided to go ahead and change that. So when you go into your features UI, you'll see that the feature state is overridden. And yes, so that's all. I think the next slide is, let's show. Okay, so what you can either do is revert code or recreate. So what revert does is that will take the changes in the database and change it back to whatever your code is that's in your feature already. It will change back to what your to what is in the feature in code. I don't know if I said that correctly. So that's basically, if in that example, if they change the description and maybe it was inadvertent, or their boss said, we want the original description that was in there, you would go ahead and revert it, and that would get rid of the change that was made. If you want to keep the change, what you would do is recreate that feature, and then it would capture that change, and then that feature would then go through the life cycle of dev and stage and production. So then when it gets back up to production, it won't be overridden anymore. So do people use DRUSH at all? So features comes with a few DRUSH commands to make your life a little easier. There's adding components to an already created feature. Features diff is one that you use features that you'll use a lot. That'll show you what if there's any overrides without having to go through the GUI.
No.
Questions? Features update. If features update is the one you would use, that's the FU command. If somebody made an override, then you would use features update to take that override and put it into the code. Reverting features using DRUSH. So yeah, that's showing you what will appear when you go into DRUSH and do a features diff, essentially. So in this instance, it looks like they changed an option from my cat list to my cat list. Yes, so the code appearing in red is the code, I'm sorry. The things that were highlighted in red in the previous, that's what's in the code. And what's highlighted in green was the override that was made through the UI. So depending on if it's a change you want to keep, you'll either revert it or update it. Debugging overridden features. So like I was saying, you can use DRUSH FD to see the changes, to see what the differences are between the overridden feature and what's in code. You can check to see that a difference, that some other module isn't causing the override. If there's a view that's overridden, you can just, there's a revert feature in the views UI, so you don't necessarily need to use features in order to revert the view. So if you're having trouble sort of figuring out why there's a difference or what the difference is, you can edit features code manually, but I mean, unless you're familiar with it, it's probably not a great idea. This is what I had mentioned earlier. There's a features server, and I think the sort of impetus behind that was that you create a feature and you could, share it with the community. But I think the reality of it is typically the features are very sort of custom to your website. So I don't know that that's used a lot. I've personally never used it. I don't know if anybody has used that or not. Yeah, it says it's no longer in wide use. So, apps. Has anybody used apps at all? Yeah, I don't think that's really caught on too well either. So an app is a feature that has a manifest that allows it to be distributed via an app server. An app is a clean, polished, modular piece of functionality. Apps are used mainly in distributions that supply optional functionality. So if you've ever used, I think, OpenPublic, that has some apps in it. I think one of the apps it has is an events calendar functionality. Overrides. So if you were using a distribution like OpenPublish or OpenPublic, that comes with pre-built features, but you don't necessarily want to use the pre-built features the way they are. You want to customize them. So when you make those changes, your features the features that already came with the distribution are going to appear overridden. You can capture those changes in a new feature called an override. So features override module was rewritten for D7 to make it easier to use. It generates simple code for overrides and allows line level inspection of overrides. It uses its existing alter hooks for its functionality. So basically what this means is, if, going back to the examples, if you use a distribution, say OpenPublic, and it comes with an article feature, and you decide you want to change or add something to that article feature, you would create a feature override for it, so features doesn't complain about the module that came with the distribution being overridden. You can just capture that override in another feature, a feature override. Features override demo. So this again isn't a real demo, it's just more screenshots essentially. Extra double secret probation demo. Okay. So you change some use cases, you change a view, or add a field to a view, or remove a field to a view, and you can do it all in one override. Wow. I guess I didn't say at the beginning that this was this presentation was originally created by Mike Potter, and he's actually the maintainer of features currently. He's my coworker at Phase 2. My name's Bill. Probably should have done that at the beginning. Okay, so this is the old method for features override. It uses the diff module, and it's basically, I mean, unless you're a developer, that probably doesn't look very attractive to you. But it shows you what the difference is. If you see if you can see what the default and then what the override is.
So why would you do that instead of just creating a different view?
Well, I guess this is the use case of that they want to change the view. So if you want to still use the existing view, but just in a different way, then you wouldn't necessarily want to create a new view. I don't know if that. So new method, override, using features override. So that's basically just showing you sort of what the code is. So yeah, the default cat field. What does it all mean? So that's case one, where as I was saying before, that you're using a distribution that already has some features and you want to customize them. So you would capture those changes in a feature override. So if there's when the distribution gets updated, you can just install new features, and you can maintain your site-specific features in an override. Do people use distributions at all? A lot are just custom.
You?
So what does it all mean? This would be the use case where you're just building from scratch. So you just build your site and with your features, and you don't have to worry about any existing ones that you need to override. So then that's what we've been talking about, deploying from dev to staging and from stage to production. Ooh, but the client needs to make an emergency change to production. So then you can capture that change to a feature override. Keep it separate or roll it back into the dev features. No, I think we're done actually. It's a little bit early. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, go ahead.
Why would you keep it separate versus
Whoops.
not reverting or not bringing it back to dev?
That's a good question.
I would think you want everything to be.
I would think that's, I don't know if that's the case where there's, something preventing that for some reason, but my inclination would be to do that as well. I'm not sure.
Depends on how you're using it, but maybe if you're using the features to create something that you're using on disparate sites, it may not be something you want to incorporate into your feature that you populate out to these other sites you're creating, and you want to keep it specific to that one site. Like if you made a photo gallery that you use on tons of websites,
multi-site environment,
or whatever, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to update your main photo gallery. This was just a one-off thing for this one site that we needed to tweak.
Yeah, that's a good use case for that. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand exactly how things move between the different areas. Do typically developers use DRUSH to be able to export and do this? So back in this environment where we've got multiple developers with laptops feeding into dev, which then feed into stage and production. So do they all sort of use DRUSH on their local drives, do a features export to be able to take that into the dev environment and they somehow,
Well, I mean, I think the glue that you're probably not mentioning is a version control system like Git. So
Right.
you would export, the developer would use DRUSH to export it, but then use Git to move it between environments, to move the code between environments.
okay. So they would check it into Git,
Yes.
and then they would use Git to put it into,
Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be Git, but I think that's sort of the standard now. But just any version control system.
but feature export is what actually puts it into.
Into code.
code.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just do user experience design and content strategy. My company wants me to eventually start building out the Drupal sites so that the developers don't have to ask me what the architecture is. So how would I know whether or not to tell them, hey, we're doing a feature versus a module? Is it just kind of up to them personally?
Yeah, I would say it depends on what they're doing. Like if they're building something that's custom, I mean, that
Which
would.
we always are. I mean, everything's custom.
Right, so that wouldn't necessarily involve features. That would be more along the lines if you're building, like, if it was in a content type that you were creating, then you would export that into a feature. But if it's sort of like custom functionality, it would just be in a custom module.
Okay. So I probably don't really need features that
No,
way.
I mean, yeah, not everyone. I guess if there's no questions, it's happy hour time.